Deep under the sea, there is a world of eternal night, where the bizarre is ordinary, where the largest and smallest of strange creatures live, where death comes swiftly through the dark shadows. As nature's experiments wend their way in the never-ending struggle for survival, journey deep into the murky realm of unexplained territory, seeking answers to endless puzzles, encountering strange animals that seem to come from our darkest nightmares in our quest to uncover the phantoms of the deep. There are two worlds below the ocean waves. The first is familiar to us, the world of coral reefs and beautiful fish, one we have studied extensively for the last century. The other is as unfamiliar to us as any alien civilization. It is a world like no other, where the bizarre is commonplace. A world where evolution seems to have gone crazy. A world where nature has created strange creatures in mad experiments that rival the imagination of any science fiction writer. It is the realm of the phantoms. Once we begin to enter the depths, we encounter beings which are at once strange and beautiful. Jellyfish are one of nature's perfect examples of adaptation for survival. What appears as almost beautiful ornaments is in fact a well-designed product of natural selection. Each part of a living being is developed to serve a particular function. Propulsion is the key to even some of the simpler animals in the ocean. Poisonous tentacles that practically drip off their bodies serve the purpose of gathering food. Traveling the ocean void, the lion's mane jellyfish relies upon a chance meeting to ensnarl its prey. Teeming by the millions, these thimble jellies create a stunning array of light and color, reflected in the beauty of life that can be found in every ocean of the world. The vibrancy of the sea is unmatched by the land. Even animals that are more familiar to us can be found in strange forms. What at first looks normal suddenly appears alien, like the merging of two creatures, a fish and a bird. But a bird that seems to have crab-like legs coming from its wings, walking on the ocean floor. Where did this animal come from? What caused it to develop fins, wings, and feet? How does a fish evolve to use water to bloat its body to double its size when faced with threats? Why has nature created a fish whose tail has almost disappeared, propelling itself with two large fins? The ocean sunfish can produce 300 million eggs during its lifetime. Truly one of evolution's most successful experiments, growing to 6 feet in length and weighing 1,000 pounds. Most of these questions still have answers that elude us. The vastness of the sea has allowed evolution to take many different turns in its continuing experiments. Surely what we are seeing now is only a fragment of what must have come and gone in the past. But what a fascinating picture it is painting for us of the unknown deep. Humans have been studying the creatures of the ocean for a millennia, but our investigations have barely scratched the surface of what is the largest ecosystem on the planet. The oceans of the world cover more than 2/3 of the planet's surface and average 10,000 feet deep. Until 30 years ago, no human explorer had ever visited the deepest part of the oceans. But when marine biologists arrived in the Marianas Trench, some 35,000 feet deep, they were surprised to find that life had made a foothold there too. It was unexpected. It was strange. How could life exist in a place where the pressure is an astonishing 8 tons per square inch, the equivalent of 12 cars sitting on every square inch of the sea bottom? This discovery led to more investigations into the deep. What we have found as we explore this world of eternal darkness is that nature has been busy. busy developing animals that are unlike anything else we have ever seen. Scientists still know very little about the deep ocean, except that every time they enter it, they are likely to find some new creature, some new experiment of evolution that is sure to boggle the mind. Humans cannot live under this extreme pressure. Our bodies are too fragile to survive this kind of environment. So we must build machines that act like cocoons, separating us from the elements outside. By far the best way to explore the deep is with the use of submarines. Submarines work on a very simple principle. The inside must be kept at the same pressure as the surface, while holding back the pressure from the outside. In essence, it is the same thing we do with rocket ships or the space shuttle. But in space, the design of the vessel is to keep the pressure inside to protect astronauts from the vacuum of space. The difference between the vacuum of space and the inside of the spaceship is only about 14 pounds per square inch. The difference between the inside of a submarine and the deepest part of the ocean is over 15,000 pounds per square inch. This is why submarines must be built with steel walls that are several inches thick. Leading the way in the quest to find answers to these puzzles is the Deep Water Exploration Team from the Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute. The deep submersible, Juergensen Sea Link, is used extensively by Dr. Grant Gilmore to explore the ocean depths. Designed to withstand the pressures of the ocean found at over 3,000 feet, the Juergensen Sea Link is a marvel of modern-day technology.
Why are we exploring the sea? Because we don't know much about the ocean. It's an unexplored, virtually unexplored frontier. You say, well, how can you say that? I mean, people have been crossing across the oceans for centuries. But look out the window here. What do you see? How many fish do you see from a cruise ship deck? How many fish do you see when you go to the beach? How many marine organisms do you see looking across the broad expanse of the ocean's surface? Not many.
The average depth of the ocean is about 10,000 feet, with trenches that drop to 35,000 feet. That is as far down as a jet airliner is high when it is at cruising altitude. In between the surface and the bottom, there are unimaginable numbers of fish and other sea creatures yet to be discovered. Scientists like Gilmore are probing the ocean depths to fill in the gaps in our knowledge of the sea.
So why do we need the ocean? Why do we have to go below these waves and see what's going on there? Our food may come from the oceans in the future. Our climate comes from the oceans. There are many reasons for studying the oceans. Of course, now we have to ask, well, how are we going to find out what's going on in the oceans? Well, we have to enter the water. And in the latter part of this century, we've been entering the water. We have scuba gear now, we have rebreathers, and we have deep diving submarines or submersibles. We have a handful of deep diving submarines exploring the oceans today. There's less funding today than there has been in the past for ocean exploration. The submarine that we're launching from the aft deck of this ship costs approximately $14,000 a day to operate. That's on a daily basis for the cost of the ship, the submarine in total. Now, to launch a space shuttle, to go on a space shuttle mission, it varies in cost, but the average cost is around $450 million, I'm told. $450 million would fund submersible dives twice a day, every day, 365 days a year for 143 years. So that's one space shuttle mission would equal 2 lifetimes of diving every day into the deep sea and submersible. Considering the importance of the ocean to our survival on Earth, not only the physical factors, but also the food and biological factors, I think we should be considering exploration of the oceans is a very, very important direction for our country and the world to go.
The journey to the depths is always a hazardous one. The submarine is routinely subjected to pressures of over 1,500 pounds per square inch. If even a pinhole leak developed in the sub during deep dives, the crew would be crushed in an instant. It is equipped with several tools to aid in the collection of specimens, including claws, suction tubes, collection buckets, and even a 6-shot spear gun.
I think one of the most exciting things of diving into the deep sea is to realize that you're going back in time. Of course, many people don't realize this. The deeper you go, the more archaic some of these creatures are. You're seeing living fossils, animals that were thought to be extinct for millions of years have been rediscovered this century or even in the last decade or two. And this is quite exciting. This means we're going to see bizarre animals that you don't typically see. You're going to see organisms that are unusual in their body shape and form, and of course there's still many organisms down there left to be discovered. They've been protected from extinction, and some of the great extinctions that have taken place on this planet. These particular great extinctions, we know, eradicated many species on land, but in the ocean, and some of these ocean basins, apparently they survived. They were able to pass their lineage on to today's oceans. So we're rediscovering them. And there are many surprises down there.
An unusual cast of characters awaits the scientists at the bottom. Some are becoming very familiar to them, and some they've never seen before. Others are so unique as to be almost indescribable. The 200-pound sea bass seems very interested in the strange mechanical phantom that has intruded into its neighborhood. While this large king crab wants no part of the invaders. A large part of the research done by Gilmore involves not only collecting samples of new species, but also documenting their behavior, some behavior stranger than others. The cutlass fish belongs to the largest order of vertebrates on the planet, the perciforms. Dating back 135 million years, this order of fishes is still relatively young compared to some of the more archaic.
An example of one of these archaic fishes, one of the most archaic living today, are the chimeras, which are related to sharks, which are quite unusual. They are cartilaginous. They also are internally fertilized like the sharks.
The chimera, also known as a ratfish, is about to lay her eggs. The chimera gives birth to 2 embryos, which are encased in a protective egg sac. This egg sac is then dropped by the mother in an area where it will lie until the pups are ready to hatch. The mother will often brush the eggs into a good hiding place to keep them away from potential predators.
We have many bizarre bony fishes in the ocean. The eels, the true eels, are an archaic group. They go back many millions of years.
Sometimes the lights of the submarine will temporarily mesmerize a fish, allowing predators a few precious seconds to home in on the prey. This fish, stunned by the light, is in the wrong place at the wrong time. After the free meal, the eel moves on to try to find other victims. In the search for undiscovered animals, Gilmore and the sub-crew devise a very simple plan. Take a basket of bait down to the bottom of the sea and wait to see what shows up. The basket is placed on the bottom using the robotic arm of the sub. The crew waits to see what happens. Their wait is very short indeed. a 13-foot 6-gill shark arrives first and immediately begins to scan the bait basket. It wastes no time in going to work on it. Deep water is the domain of the 6-gill shark. Their keen sense of smell is rivaled only by their ability to detect the most minute amount of light. Like all sharks, 6-gills are excellent scavengers and serve to keep the ocean bottom clean of dead or dying animals. After finishing most of the large pieces of bait, the 6-gill then does something remarkable. It angles itself over some of the smaller bait fish lying around the basket. Going completely vertical, it uses its powerful jaws to create a suction motion and literally inhales the fish from the bottom, like some giant vacuum cleaner with teeth. Satisfied, it moves on. Shortly after the large predator swims away, the second tier of scavengers enter the scene. A hagfish arrives to begin its gruesome work. Hundreds of strange shrimp descend upon the scraps left by the shark and begin to fight over the remains. This will continue until all is consumed. Nothing is wasted in the deep. Many of the seldom-seen phantoms of the deep are living examples of the earliest fishes ever to evolve in the world's oceans. Fishes that have left living records of their evolutionary development. One example of these early fishes is the lamprey. It has no bones and a mouth filled with circular rows of teeth it uses to bore holes in its prey. Once a lamprey has attached itself to its victim, it will literally suck the fluids of its prey as it feeds, moving on only after the host has died. Probably the best example of the first kind of fish to inhabit the oceans is the hagfish. It is blind, with no bones, and feeds only on dead or dying animals. With multiple pores that ooze slime that can help to suffocate a victim that is not yet dead, the hagfish is one of nature's more gruesome creatures. Hagfishes are the ultimate scavengers. They will crawl into any orifice and eat the dead animal from the inside out. They possess scraping tools in their mouths, designed to carve out pieces of rotting flesh. Its gruesome labor is accomplished quickly. Representing another interesting turn in the evolutionary ladder are fishes which have developed the ability to partially breathe air, such as this garfish. The garfish can gulp air from the surface to augment its oxygen needs. This adaptation has allowed it to continue to survive in waters that cannot support other aquatic organisms. The bowfin is probably one of the best adapted to air breathing. It too can gulp air and extract oxygen. It does this so well, in fact, that several bowfins have been found buried in mud and unearthed by farmers hundreds of yards away from rivers and streams, still alive. Of all the strange creatures to have evolved over the eons, the hammerhead shark is by far one of the most intriguing. It possesses an elongated head which aids it in finding prey hidden beneath the sand. It is also considered the most intelligent of the shark family. It can often be found in massive schools and has exhibited social interaction not normally associated with shark behavior. The paddlefish is virtually a living fossil. It has remained unchanged since the Cretaceous period, dating back 135 million years ago. Despite its monstrous appearance, it is in reality a gentle giant, feeding solely on plankton, which it scoops up with its giant mouth. Sturgeon are the largest of fish found in fresh water. The biggest specimen ever captured weighed more than 2,000 pounds and was longer than 20 feet. The sturgeon also dates back to at least 135 million years ago. They feed using a very unique method, a large tube that extends from their mouths, which they use much like a vacuum cleaner sucking up food from the muddy bottom of rivers. Moving up the evolutionary scale of fishes, there are many examples of the division known as teleost, fishes with skeletons and rayed fins. Tarpon are one such example. Their ability to turn is limited to swimming in circles. Contrast that with one of the highest fishes in the evolutionary order of teleosts, known as perciforms. These fish are easily identified by their ability to rotate on their axis, making feeding and defense much more efficient. Even higher on the evolutionary scale are the flatfishes, such as halibuts and flounders. These animals begin life as normal-looking, symmetrical fish. Once the young are about an inch long, their bodies undergo a remarkable metamorphosis. One eye will migrate across their head to join with the other, and the fish will begin to swim on the eyeless side. They use their flat form to hide in the sand and ambush prey. In some cases, certain species of fish, such as this porcupine pufferfish, have developed more direct means of self-protection. The porcupine puffer is a rather slow-moving fish that searches the bottom for mollusks. Occasionally, it will come upon smaller fish which hide in the sand. The puffer works very hard at catching the little fish when he is out of his hole. But the smaller fish has a greater defense. There is too much sand between him and the hungry puffer. Try as he might, the puffer can't coax the little fish out of his hole. So he moves on, and by doing so, runs into an awful fright. A nearby moray eel is just waiting for some unsuspecting fish to swim by his lair. Alarmed at coming so close to a ferocious predator, the puffer activates its defense mechanism, doubling its size and exposing the sharp quills of its skin. Having averted disaster, the puffer moves on, still searching for his evening meal. Some phantoms of the deep have evolved elaborate body shapes to blend in with their surroundings. This is a sea dragon, which is related to the seahorse. It doesn't even look much like a fish, but it is. The sea dragon is a marvel of evolutionary camouflage. Its many false appendages allows it to hide among the seagrass while it searches for food. Looking every bit like a cross between a horse and a dragon, the sea dragon lives mainly in the waters of the Indian Ocean. This particular dragon is a male, and like its cousins, the seahorses, the males are the ones who carry the eggs. The sea dragon carries its eggs not in a pouch, but on the base of its tail. After fertilization, the female transfers the eggs to the male for safekeeping. He will protect them until they hatch. In this way, the young are protected from predators in the same way as their parents, through the use of camouflage. Sometimes being really ugly and threatening looking is enough to keep predators away from a fish and its eggs. Such is the case of the bizarre-looking wolf eel. Its bulbous head, full of bumps and enormous jaws, serve as adequate warning to any potential threats. Like most eels, it prefers to find itself a nice crack in the rocks to hide from both predators and prey alike. This eel has developed strong, crushing jaws with very large molars. It has evolved to eat mostly hard-shell mollusks. Hidden within its nest is a large ball of eggs. Protected by a mother that looks like this, these eggs stand a very good chance of hatching. Swimming clams are a fascinating member of the mollusk family, but not particularly known for their intelligence. This one swims a bit too close by and makes a very quick meal for the hungry wolf eel. The shells of its cousins line the outside of the eel's lair. One of the most evil-looking phantoms of the deep turns out to be the most gentle. The manta ray was called the devilfish by early sailors who believed it could fly out of the water and knock men into the sea. In reality, the manta ray feeds only on plankton and is the most graceful member of the ray family. The octopus has also been maligned through history. It was believed that the octopus used its tentacles to snatch people from boats and drag them below the waves to devour them. What is not well known about the octopus, however, is that it is probably the most intelligent non-mammal in the sea. It uses its elaborate camouflage and the ability to squeeze into tight cracks and crevices to hunt. In this case, crawling through a hole results in a face-to-face encounter with a diver. Clearly surprised, the octopus appears to attack the diver. Deciding it's time to get away, the octopus releases ink to confuse its adversary and make his getaway. Clearly disturbed by this encounter, the octopus changes color to shocked white. The octopus has the ability to change the color and texture of its skin almost instantly, depending upon its mood and the color of its surroundings. It uses this ability not only for camouflage, but to communicate with other octopi as well. After calming down, the octopus once again changes color to blend into the rocks around it to hide. Over the eons, nature has created intricate dances of complexity in many relationships between the differing species of the ocean realm. One such relationship can be found in the coral reef. In this particular case, a checkerboard wrasse has developed a symbiotic relationship with a clown triggerfish. The triggerfish will fight to keep all others away from her nest, but allows the wrasse to have free access to them. The reason is simple. The wrasse has no interest in eating her eggs. It is after the gastropods and small parasites who try to raid the nest. Meanwhile, the triggerfish stands guard over her eggs and constantly forces water over them to provide the embryos with oxygen. But the system is not always foolproof. Sometimes a hungry predator, such as this jewel damselfish, manages to snatch one of the precious eggs. This symbiotic relationship is intertwined with yet another one nearby. Taking its cue from the checkerboard wrasse that all is safe outside its burrow, the red-banded prawn goby appears. The goby lives with a small yellow prawn. The prawn is blind and vulnerable to predators, but makes an excellent housekeeper who will constantly tend to the small cave, keeping it free of debris and rubble. In exchange, the goby will provide a security service. By sticking its tail down the hole, the goby warns the prawn to stay inside. Danger is nearby. The damsel attack is foiled. All is secure in the goby's home. A true example of cross-dependency. There are many parasitic relationships in all ecosystems of the world, and the ocean is no exception. For example, these Remoras are waiting for a host animal to come by so they can hitch a free ride. There are at least 8 species of Remoras. They're almost always found with a host animal. The fact that these Remoras are alone indicates their particular host, in this case a tiger shark, must be close by. Remoras have organs on their heads which act like powerful suction cups, allowing them to attach themselves to other larger animals. They sustain themselves on scraps left over from their feeding hosts. The host animals generally receive no benefit from the remoras and can even suffer infection from the wounds created by the abrasive suction organs. In one experiment, a manta ray held still in the water column while a marine biologist pried a remora off its head with a knife. The remora refused to let go, even up to the death. The manta ray then returned to swim with the diver as if to show gratitude. Until recent years, human exploration of the ocean was limited to either submarines or the maximum depth our bodies could tolerate using scuba tanks, usually no more than 100 feet or so. With the development of new scuba devices, however, the depth in which divers can explore has greatly expanded. Not all of the unknown species of fish live in the deepest part of the ocean. There are still numerous creatures yet to be cataloged by scientists. With the new technology of closed-circuit rebreathers, a scientist may now dive deeper than ever before to search for new kinds of fish. One of the pioneers in using this new technology is marine biologist Mike Severns. He and our film crew have come to Indonesia to dive deep into the abyss.
The dive coming up is off an island called Buaya, and it happens to be in a channel which is pretty much runs parallel to the connection of the continental plates of Australia and Asia. It also, at one end of the channel is the Indian Ocean, at the other end of the channel is the Banda Sea. It's a very remarkable situation. I've photographed maybe 75 or 80% of the species in Indonesia.
Diving deep requires the use of exotic breathing gases like helium. To this day, only a handful of divers are qualified to dive mixed gas rebreathers. Gas mixing is the most critical part of preparation for a deep dive. Too much of one gas, or not enough of another, could result in fatal consequences for the divers. In order to minimize the narcotic effect of nitrogen at deep depths, half of the gas the divers will breathe is made up of helium, with only 15% oxygen. The balance of the mix is nitrogen. Once the gases are mixed, they must be analyzed yet again to ensure proper levels of oxygen. Much like the backpacks worn by astronauts, rebreathers recirculate the diver's breath, scrubbing out the carbon dioxide and adding oxygen as necessary. Due to their complexity, each diver prepares his own rig. It is a task that filmmakers Kevin Juergensen and John McKenney have performed often to document the ocean depths. At the heart of every successful deep dive is hours of planning and preparation. Rebreathers are complex machines that require meticulous maintenance. The advantage of rebreathers is they allow the divers to stay underwater for up to 8 hours, on half the gas they would normally consume in 30 minutes using conventional scuba equipment. They also release no bubbles during the dive, which allows the filmmakers to get much closer to animals that are naturally skittish. Electronically controlled, the rebreathers provide continuous diving data through a redundant system of displays. The time has come to dive into the unknown, into the Twilight Zone, an area of the reef between 200 and 400 feet down.
What I hope to do on this dive is, as we descend the wall, find a platform or a flat bottom at someplace around 300 feet or so, where we might find a community of fish that no one's ever seen before. And what we're going to be looking for would be anything that's remarkable. And this is where previous deep diving experience in Indonesian waters will probably help out. The Twilight Zone is an area that's basically determined by the light that penetrates. In other words, in very clear seas, a Twilight Zone would be much deeper than it is, say, in Indonesia.
The divers descend an almost vertical wall underwater, each with a specific mission. As the depth increases, the familiar light from above begins to fade rapidly. Their mission is simple: to find and document new or rarely seen species of fish found primarily in the waters around Indonesia. Severns has logged over 1,000 dives in Indonesia. In the last 10 years, he has dived off of 100 different islands that make up the Indonesian archipelago. The search for new species of fish at these depths is not an easy task. Besides having patience and a keen eye, the searcher must be well aware of which fish have already been discovered and which have not. At these depths, where the light levels are extremely low, the ability to easily recognize fish types is mandatory. In Indonesian waters, this becomes a greater chore, as there are over 3,000 species of fish that have already been described.
Familiar with a great many of the deeper species, and if something new should just sort of pop into the scene, it's going to stick out, I hope, and be a remarkable fish. We got down to 300 feet, and I looked over and could see Rod down there, and turned back around, and a fish went by me that was about 6 inches, 7 inches long, with red bars, almost like diamonds on its side. Never seen anything like it. And then as I turned around to follow him and get photographs of that fish, we ran into a purple fish, and with a little bit of luck, we've got it on film. So we're looking at probably 2 new species of fish on one dive that lasted less than 10 minutes on the bottom. And it just goes to show the richness of this Twilight Zone area, the area that we're exploring now, and there are many other people looking in this same area now. It's virtually untouched. The amount of time you're allowed there is so small that you're basically just sampling each place you go.
Through their exploration, scientists like Severns hope to fill in some of the gaps in our knowledge of deep water animals. This is a relatively new field of study, with less than a handful of researchers scouring the Twilight Zone worldwide. The picture that is emerging from all this effort is only a small fragment of information collected over the years from the ocean, an ecosystem that contains multiple layers, each one supporting the other. Life cycles of shallow water animals, for example, provide nutrients for many levels of life in the ocean, including those in the Twilight Zone. In turn, they do the same for those below them, and so on. Each of these levels contain creatures that fill similar positions in the food chain: predators, prey, scavengers, and parasites, some performing more than one role. But there is also an upward migration of food that exists as well. In this way, many deep water animals become food for the creatures of the higher levels, which begins the cycle all over again. This process goes on in every ocean across the globe and forms the basis for a planet-wide ecosystem that supports even terrestrial life, including our own. For the ocean is the largest source of nutrients and oxygen on Earth. The miracle of life in the ocean thus renews itself perpetually. Before leaving the abyss, the divers will have to undergo hours of decompression. On deep dives, the gas divers breathe enters their body tissues in concentrated amounts because of the high pressure. As they ascend to shallower depths and the pressure is decreased, the gas leaves their tissue at an accelerated rate. If they ascend too fast, this escaping gas can form bubbles in their bloodstream, causing a condition known as the bends. The divers must slowly rise up through the water column, allowing the expanding gas time to be expelled without harm. Divers such as these accept the risk of the environment in which they work to expand human understanding of our planet's oceans. Back in the Gulf of Mexico, Dr. Grant Gilmore and the Harbor Branch submarine are ready to begin collecting samples of deep-water fishes. Using the robotic arm and suction device, they collect one fish after another. The suction arm is an indispensable tool for the scientists. If at all possible, the fish must be collected undamaged, as a wound or mark on the fish's body could cover up the slightest variance in its anatomy, which could be the determining factor of it being a new species. Their work continues for several hours. As many specimens as possible are collected during their dives. In these depths down to 3,000 feet, chances of finding a fish that has never been seen before are excellent. If the fish is too large for the suction tube, it can be placed directly in the collection bucket. The subcrew must work fast as time spent on the bottom is limited by the submersible's battery life. Oftentimes, the fish's natural defense to swim away or hide in an unreachable location will force the subcrew to utilize alternative collection methods. Running along the length of the collection arm is a tube which squirts a chemical called rotenol into the general vicinity of the hiding fish. The rotenol causes the fish to be immobilized, allowing the subcrew to use the suction arm or robotic claw to collect the specimen. Most of the time, they get the fish they are after, but quite often, others emerge that they hadn't expected, giving them additional opportunities to find new species. Their mission accomplished, the sub must now head for the surface. Since the sub is untethered to the mothership, it makes this journey guided only by radio communication from above. Because the submarine is kept at the same pressure as the surface during the dive, there is no need for the crew to endure lengthy hours of decompression. A typical expedition like this will last anywhere from 2 weeks to a month, with the scientists making a minimum of 2 dives every 24 hours. Once back on the surface, the Johnson Sea Link is retrieved by the ship's crew. It is carefully brought back to the mothership, Edwin Link, and hoisted out of the water. The engineering crew must now spend the next few hours going over all operating systems. At a cost of $14,000 per day to run the operation, downtime due to mechanical failure must be avoided. Capturing what looks like a new species of fish is just the beginning for Gilmore. Marine biology fieldwork is merely the first step in a process that can take months or years to complete in the laboratory. Back in the lab, Gilmore begins the lengthy process of cataloging and identifying the collected samples. It is exhaustive work, but one which Gilmore is well acquainted with, having discovered several new species in the last few years.
One of the first things we do when we capture a new species is to try to describe it as quickly as possible. This drawing was made when the fish was first brought to the surface with a submarine.
The color of the fish must be noted quickly, since most fish will lose their natural colors shortly after they die. Gilmore will now begin to draw the fish skeleton while under the microscope, so that the intricate bone structure may be compared to other species of fish to determine if it is related in any way.
In this case, we have to fish with a new method because we have to look at it in more detail in order to determine whether it's a new species or not. We will place the fish in a chemical, and this chemical will clear the flesh so we can actually see the bones of the fish.
After the fish has been dyed red and put under the microscope, Gilmore will begin to make a detailed drawing of the skeleton.
With this drawing, we now know that this is a new species, and we can see the skeleton is quite different from other Cyprinodon.
Gilmore's drawings and manuscript describing the fish will now be sent to a technical journal for publication. Once it has been published and reviewed by his colleagues, it will be recognized as a new species. The name that he has given it will now be established as the universal scientific name for the fish. The quest to discover new species in the animal kingdom has led Gilmore down the road of exploration, a journey that has included months of writing grant proposals to fund his projects, hundreds of hours spent at the bottom of the ocean searching, and countless hours in the laboratory analyzing his finds. Scientists like Gilmore have dedicated their lives to education, finding fulfillment in each new discovery. So what have we learned so far on our journeys into the deep? For one, we know that our catalog of living species in the world is vastly incomplete. It is estimated that we are only aware of roughly 40% of all living animals today. That means that there are 60% of which we have never seen somewhere out there. We have also learned that nature is full of surprising twists and turns in the history of evolution, that particular animals have adapted to living in nearly every part of the earth, from the highest mountains to the deepest oceans. In the deep, the special circumstances of pressure and darkness have yielded creatures like no other found on the planet. And it is not just the fish that have evolved in strange ways. There are entire orders of deep-water invertebrates that have only recently been seen by humans. These invertebrates can range from the microscopic to the huge, with some measuring 160 feet long. But it is the fish that approach our nightmares. The monsters imagined through childhood seem to be alive in the deep. Fish that use lights to illuminate predators or to attract prey ply the great expanses of the ocean's abyssal plain. Living sea monsters, huge in our imagination, yet shorter than a finger. Fish such as these beg the question, is evolution still going on? Or has it somehow stopped, leaving us with these bizarre creatures? Certainly in the case of some fish, it has indeed stopped. The sturgeon has remained unchanged for millions of years. It continues to thrive in waters throughout the world. The chimera, too, has remained unchanged since prehistoric times. But others, like this frogfish, seem to defy our idea of evolution. The frogfish has almost completely lost the ability to swim and uses its fins much the same way as terrestrial animals use feet. It essentially walks along the bottom of the ocean in search of prey. The frogfish has more or less traded the ability to swim for the ability to walk and hide. This represents a fascinating example of evolution, changing two completely different aspects of an animal at once, one to compensate for the other. When the frogfish lost the ability to swim fast, it became vulnerable to predators, so it developed elaborate camouflage in order to hide from them as well as its prey. The de-evolution of fins in this creature is a fascinating example of the continuing process of the evolution of species in the ocean. The mudskipper is an even better example of possible evolution in action. It lives both in and out of the water with equal ease. It extracts oxygen from the air and the water. Somehow, it has evolved this remarkable ability that gives it many advantages over other fish that cannot leave the water. It can search for food equally well in both environments. It can take shelter from predators, whether they are land or sea-based. In freshwater, there is also the walking catfish, which clearly has the ability to walk on land and breathe air. This has allowed walking catfish to spread themselves from one area to another in their native habitat. Clearly an evolutionary advantage over other non-walking catfish. Millions of years ago, the first creatures from the sea emerged and eventually formed all land-based animals we know of, including humans. Could it be that what we are seeing is that process occurring all over again? As we ply the depths of the oceans, we will continue to search for answers to these intriguing questions. Answers which are wrapped in riddles, buried in secrets, and locked away in the deepest depths of the ocean realm, the domain of the phantoms of the deep.